So there's a correction I've been meaning to make for a long time, and I keep forgetting because my memory's out the window. But Sarah Hayter and her organization, Ex-Muslims of North America, I forget exactly what it was I said, but I assume that there was an outreach component to that organization uh, in terms of not recruiting people. I mean, recruit is such a nasty word, but in terms of dealing with apostasy issues and sort of encouraging people to apostatize. So apparently, she's made on some interviews the remark that they don't actually do outreach. They mainly just, when people are ready and they feel like they've gotten to a point of doubt or questioning their faith or whatever, they come to ex-Muslims of North America and they kind of handle them in that way. But I just saw a clip of her talking about reform or apostasy. And it wasn't anything specific about like the benefits of reform and or the benefits of just leaving religion altogether. It was more along the lines of what is truth and what is not true, and how religious organizations kind of have to deal with the truth as it comes out, and sometimes trying to stifle that truth, but it still kind of seeps out from the sides, and it gets to a point where they can't really deny much anymore. It's kind of reminiscent of a lot of stuff that's going on today with various religious organizations and abuse and economic issues and spending issues and sexual abuse issues, etc., etc. So just making that correction, but I think she's right when Sarah Hayter's right when it comes to the truth and the way the truth kind of at some point gets kind of obvious and people can't deny it anymore. I'm always kind of questioning the reaction, even in 2018, like questioning the reaction of people to things that are true. You end up with this very strange mix of reactions, especially these days. I was just listening to the first part of Claire Lehman's interview with Dave Rubin on dangerous ideas, and I think some of these ideas that were sort of like kind of taken over by the left, have and this whole post-structuralist attitude coming from the 70s and definitely onward now in terms of feminism and postmodernism, its intersectionality, etc., etc. I think for a long time, ideas have been sort of controlled by them, and why wouldn't it have been controlled? Because it's more humanistic, it's more inclusive, etc., etc. But I think we're coming to an ends here where the left is becoming almost fascistic in their views of dangerous ideas and scientific fact and things like that. So on the right, however, you have this kind of what seems like this kind of conservative reversion to traditional ideas about, say, maybe example things like sex and gender, etc., etc. And let me just say that and this was kind of the main point of this video as well. I'm gay, and I've not ever really experienced anything too crazy in terms of discrimination. I mean, when you compare it to some conservative countries like Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or Iraq, you could definitely see a big difference. And I live in Canada now, so I mean, you could definitely see a big difference in terms of how gay people are treated. So I have no major complaints. I mean, I still think there are issues when it comes to sex ed, or education or law and inclusiveness and anti-discrimination law when it comes to LGBT people, how that's represented in universities and in law schools, or even the way organizations like law societies deal with issues surrounding LGBT rights. I think there's a lot to be said even in Canada when it comes to those types of issues, and so it's not irrelevant. But I do have to say that on a humanistic level, like when you're talking about gay rights or even transgender rights or anything like that, I think it's important to realize that these are just human people. Like they're humans. Like they're not. It's not just some sort of fancy issue that gets bumped around. Like, I mean, you're talking about actual people, and I think on a human rights level, I mean, these people should be afforded all the standard human rights. I mean, I don't think it's unfair or special privileges for anybody. I mean, that's just a given. So that's all I want to say. I mean, when it comes to, say, transgenderism, or I don't know if that's a word, transgenderism, but transgender issues, I mean, I definitely think that there's a certain level of dysfunction when it comes to being born into a body that you don't think you were supposed to be born into. And I also know that there are some studies that say that these things shouldn't be necessarily acted upon in childhood in a medical sense, because for some reason these children grow up and they kind of fit into their bodies as is. And any kind of medical or surgical intervention, I think before they're old enough to make decisions on their own is kind of, I wouldn't think would be, I don't think should be encouraged. I really don't. And I think that just makes sense. So that's where I'm coming from. I kind of wanted to just touch on the LGBT stuff, not really much else. But yeah, that's where I am. I don't think I think these issues when it comes to gender dysphoria, I think these things should be explored. I mean, things when it comes to intelligence and race, I think these things should be explored. I see no harm, except for people who have just kind of gotten tied down to this sort of social justice warrior type mentality. And it happens on the right as well. I mean, the right can be just as bigoted, and it traditionally has been more bigoted than the left. But I mean, the left is kind of coming into this quote unquote maturity now that is just as kind of fascistic as the right. Like, I mean, when it comes to ideas and things like that. So yeah, so that's basically it for now. I can't think of anything else. Yeah, bye.